All right, ready to get started? Okay.
So what's the next beat?
Statement, raise your hand, she'll recognize you. Same thing with this side. Like a comment or raise your hand for a question, Dr. G will recognize you. Okay. You got the first question? Oh, well, I got one question. Let's just start. Yeah. Didn't you write a book called The Cultural Unity of Black Africa?
Yeah. The
So,
domains of patriarchy and matriarchy in classical antiquity. That's a subtitle and it's far more descriptive of the content.
Oh, yeah, because as you were describing, I was thinking about that book. So,
Yeah.
The Cultural Unity of Black Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any questions?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Doctor, here's the question I have for you. You talked about identity, right? Now, you're an Egyptologist, right?
No,
Okay. You studied
I study Egypt, but I'm not an Egyptologist.
Okay.
And I'm very disappointed that you lumped me with those people. It's an important, I'm making fun, right, of you,
Right.
but it's an important distinction.
Okay.
An Egyptologist is usually a Eurocentric student of history
Okay.
who tries to paint our people white.
Right. And that goes to the point I'm making. The old kingdom, did they call them pharaohs or kings? The old
Pharaohs.
kings. Okay.
The word is per-a, which means great house.
Right. But if you look at their sculptures and their statues, you can see the Africa.
Yes.
All the features, and this is just now coming out because they've been hiding this.
Yeah,
So
we know that.
once you see it, the identity is automatically there.
Yeah.
But they hide those antiques and everything. Like the first one, definitely African. All 20s, it's unbelievable.
There are so many
Yeah.
that they're uncomfortable.
Right.
But some of us have moved beyond the material content. And I do a lot of work in the language. And one of the things that I think terrified as well as upset white people in England, I used to teach at the university in England, is that I did a full etymology of the word ebony. The first place you see the word ebony is an ancient Egyptian writer. But you check the European dictionaries, they will tell you Greek, perhaps Greek, and something. They never say this is an African word. And I did the full stuff on it, from it going, it's not even an ancient Egyptian word. It's what they call a loan word. Ancient Egyptians borrowed it from another African group of people. And from ancient Egyptian, it went into Hebrew. From Hebrew, it went into Greek. From Greek, it went into Latin, the Romans. During the Pax Romana, the peace of the Romans, when Rome conquered all of Western Europe, it was transferred from Latin into all those European languages. So you got Ibanos, and similar word in Spanish and Portuguese. You got Ibi and Ibi in French and Old French. You got Ebenholz in Dutch and a similar word in German. You got ebony in English. In Middle English, there is heavily with the H, and there are explanations of all of this. We encountered that word today, and we don't know it's a word that comes from Africa. And it's not singular. There are many other words. Desert is an ancient Egyptian word. And we could go on and on and on in these things. So I hope that we know that our scholars are beginning to reclaim more and more of our ancestral heritage.
But the point I'm trying to get to is why isn't that out there? It's because you're saying
It's a
this.
fight.
I'm sorry?
It's a fight. You think?
I found it, I just went on.
Yes, but you see, how many of us, a growing number of us are interested in that way now. But we have to organize and systematize. Our brother said, build institutions. That's what we have to do. And I want to return to something that's happening in front of our eyes today. It's no coincidence that Trump and Rubio and all of these rascals are trying to tell us that we mustn't learn our own history. It suits their purpose. They know that somebody who knows their history is not somebody.
You can miss it.
Exactly. And, I nearly said it before, but I'm going to say it now. Look at the Caribbean. Tell me which islands have their greatest sense of history and culture and self-love. It's Jamaica and Haiti. You want to mess with a Jamaican? No, don't worry, he's a Jamaican. Who's that we're thinking about? But on average, this is a fact. Right? On average, this is a fact. Do you know who the people of Haiti are? These Africans from Haiti, they defeated 5 armies, European armies.
Yes.
They defeated 2 from Napoleon, when Napoleon ruled France as the world's military superpower. He sent his own brother-in-law, General Leclerc, to lead an army. Our brothers and sisters put life to them. They defeated an English army under General Maitland, 60,000 men. England would become the world's superpower shortly after, in the Battle of Waterloo, when Napoleon met his final defeat. They defeated the Spanish army, and they defeated an army of local whites and mulattoes. Think about it. It's as though the Jamaican army of today took on the United States Army twice, beat them, then took on China or Russia, beat them. That's the magnitude of what our people achieved in Haiti, using African spirituality called voodoo.
Right.
Now you know why they taught you to hate voodoo. And now you know why they always try to give Haiti a hard time. And we must intervene in the affairs of Haiti.
But
If
they
they
helped
come-
us. They
sorry?
helped us in the United States during the Revolutionary War.
Sorry?
Haiti, they sent troops to help out the United States in the Revolutionary War.
Did America have a revolution?
Well, whatever it was called.
It was a war of independence against the British.
Difference.
Significant difference. But certain people are always mislabeling reality in their favor. The brothers and sisters from Haiti aided the United States in their fight against Britain. Look what the United States has done. The government of the United States. Ingratitude.
Question.
Doctor, thank you so much for your presentation. It was just mind-blowing listening here. I mean, I'm from the Gambia, I'll say. Grew up, my mother's from Mali, spent some time in Mali. I'm somehow related to Modibo Keita. Don't know if you've ever heard of him.
Oh, come on.
Right? Spent a lot of time in his home with his mother because his sister was married to my grandfather. Right? So listening to you, and I've had oral stories in Africa, especially around Mali when I was there, from my grandmother, from the Sundiata Keita. My mother used to tell me Sundiata Keita, Sumanguru Kante.
Sumanguru Kante.
Right? Right. When I was, so I had all those stories when I was a kid. So when you talk about Egypt, I'm a Soninke. Like you said, Umu Sankare, she's a Soninke, right? We have Sankares in us, if we're related to Sankares. So I'm listening here, it's just blowing my mind, right? When you're talking about Egypt, because I heard that our people came from Egypt, right? The Soninke people came from Egypt, the relation. So I'm trying to understand the coordination between the Soninke Empire, going down to the Mali Empire, come down to Ghana, and Egypt. What's the relationship here? That was a big mixing pot in that area.
I'm glad you asked me that question. many of us do not understand the magnitude of our people's history. When our people met to build Kemet, ancient Egypt, it was Africans from a large number of different places working together. We did it again in Mali. And there's so many connections. Your constitution, the Fagan, the constitution of Mali, that Sundiata implemented. If you read it, it's a modern constitution. Human rights, protection of women, equality of women, it's all there. Same thing in Kemet. And when the disaster befell our ancestors in Kemet, they migrated to different parts of Africa. And that is one of the reasons why you have commonalities in language and culture throughout Africa. When a people migrate, or they're made to migrate, they don't leave their culture behind. Like they could leave the material things like their farms and so on. They take their culture. So when I tell you that there are words in the language and names and so on, and rituals that are the same in ancient Egypt and even before ancient Egypt, and living Africa, Africa of today, it's not a mystery. It's just that our people have been taught to forget ourselves under colonial domination. And the research interest for us personally, as well as in our institutions, have got to be to recover that history. If you permit me, sir, I'll spend 1 more minute on this.
Okay.
Something last.
I'm
talking about
but what you're talking about is going to be at the Global Africa Center for the education. It will be one of the places where all the things you're talking about will be there.
Okay. Let me just say this though. One of my current researches is on society in the ancient Happy, which is the name our people give to the Nile Valley, before Egypt and during Egypt. And there's a figure, translation from ancient Egyptian, rect means the knowledge of a woman. Most of you know her. Most of you know her. The village midwife, herbalist, spiritualist. Yeah. That figure migrated from inner Africa into Kemet and then migrated from Kemet to the rest of Africa. I was in Ghana in December and went into a village. They were saying the same thing. How many of us know or remember that babies were delivered in the southern United States by African midwives? Not until about 100 years ago when white men decided that they must control the stuff. Question, who trained them? Those African midwives. You see where I'm going? I was listening to a program in Colombia. She is there. She was in my village, Cousin Darius. We are the ones who've got to reconnect the dots and make them into streams of memory and action. But I don't want to stand.
One quick point. What can you say about Timbuktu?
Timbuktu.
Right. Well,
Timbuktu.
Mali has called it Timbuktu.
Yeah, I get it. But I just wanted people to know what we were talking about.
Right.
It was a university city.
Right.
Think about that. This is in what is called the Middle Ages. Africa had a university city. Right. It's not the first university city in Africa, because thousands of years before in Kemet, it was a university city. But many people don't understand the connection between Kemet and Timbuktu. The university in Kemet was housed within the temple. It's the same thing in Timbuktu, the temple at Sankore, the mosque of Sankore. And even Sankore, Sankara. Yes, Sankore, Sankara. You see, words change in their pronunciation over space and time. The difference is like that. You know? And we could go into what some of those people were writing. You know, they recently recovered some of those writings. And a lot of this is African people using Arabic script to write African languages. You know, I mean, again, there's so much here to go into. But the point is that Timbuktu is of immense value to our people all over the world. And we need to have a program that will retain, preserve, translate, and popularize the information in Timbuktu. I mean, there are all kinds of scientific books and papers and that kind of thing. I mean, it was a center, a huge center of learning.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hi, Kimani, you talked about the decline of the U.S. empire and the breaks and de-globalization. How do you think that would affect Africa in the future? As you know, there's another push to recognize agricultural resources and the new technologies that are available right now. Right? So how do you think that would affect African development in, let's say, next 10, 15 years? I'm very concerned about that.
Okay. Let me start by saying something. Development is about people, right? And if people are not what we were talking about, conscious, trained, motivated, and so on, organized, they're not going to make anything of their lives, of their opportunities. So I start with the recognition that African people have got to organize ourselves. We've got to become conscious. You become conscious by reading your history and checking on what's going on around you from your own point of view. More people in Africa are becoming conscious today, and more governments are responding. Some of them are being forced to respond in the interest of their populations. So you see action in the Sahel, where the inheritors of Thomas Sankara, who is an inheritor of Osajifo, Kwame Nkrumah, and Patrice Lumumba, and others, you see those military leaders are making revolutionary waves. Ibrahim Traoré and others. But you also see in places like Namibia and Botswana, African leaders are beginning to take decisive action. You see it in a place like Uganda. An old criminal. He's making, some good moves. You see it in Tanzania. And here's a key difference that I think will help to secure the African revolution. Because Africa still needs a revolution, and more people would see it. The young people are beginning to acquire information through social media. You can't put that genie back in. Right? Some of them have a romanticized notion of Africa. But you know something? I'd rather have that than the stupidity that went before. This is serious. About a month or so ago, an African American went to a certain part of Africa and told the people there that Jesus Christ could not have been a white man. They had to call the police. They nearly lynched him. That's how poisoned and confused many of our people are. I could mention many other instances like that.
Well, that's part of my concern, you know, that
Change is
people are
coming.
not much enough to really push through it.
But that
And change
consciousness is
our mind right now.
that consciousness is growing. You see, many of us who understand the situation or understand something about it, we are impatient for change. And that's good. But change wouldn't always come overnight. And sometimes change is going to surprise us. Because you can't predict when a people will explode. So, I'm very confident that Africa will change. When and how, I don't know. And this is taking into consideration how certain forces have murdered our leaders, bombed countries, and so on. I mean, I hope we know this.
Yeah.
You know, I hope we know this. So, African people have got to learn. And one of the things we must learn is that mass education is important. Anybody from Ghana here? Okay. They, people from a certain part of Ghana say if you kill one, 1,000 more can come. Do I need to explain this more? Right? That happens when people are motivated. You know, I went to live in exile in England. And when I got there was a caricature of Chinese technology, saying it was primitive and so on. Do you think yes, you can't imagine it, right? It wasn't so long ago. Do you think they could put a caricature like that? The material basis of it does not exist. And that's when change happens, when people get together and say, we got to change this. Yeah. So, you know, we have all the lessons. Let's implement them.
But how do you think AI would affect the education of,
Well, like so many other tools, is the people who use those tools and the ends for which they use them and how they implement them. I think AI has a great chance of enlightening African people. We could leapfrog certain stages, but who will be the people to visualize and implement those changes? I don't know. I don't know enough about Africa today to give a qualified answer to the question, but it's an extremely important one. It's timely, it's urgent. But I don't know. I can't give you the different answer.
I'm waiting to be recognized.
Sorry?
I'm waiting to be recognized.
Okay, go ahead.
You mentioned in your talk about kind of connecting the different diasporas. Any thoughts on kind of the direct connection or relations between the continent of Africa and the Caribbean itself? Because there's tremendous amount of similarities, but there's no really direct connection between the continent and the Caribbean. These connections are always mostly through England, the US, or a European country where those folks get connected.
You're talking about transportation?
Well, transportation ultimately is where the information is going to flow. There's no.
Oh, you're talking about information, connection?
Yeah.
There's connection. You're talking about cultural.
I'm talking about cultural connectivity, right?
Listen, let me just say this. You cannot understand most of the Caribbean if you don't understand Africa. Caribbean people were mostly kidnapped, terrorized, and shipped across the Atlantic. When we land here, they tell us we're not Africans, we're Negroes, colors, and all kind of things. But if you want to understand anything about our culture, you have to begin in Africa. Our brothers from Gambia and Mali, so he will know about the origins of rap and hip hop. Because our people were always talking over stringed instruments. The storytellers, Mamadou Kouyaté and others. This is nothing new to us. You want to talk about calypso and reggae? The word is not calypso. Calypso was a Greek whore. If you read, come on, who wrote Odysseus and them? Homer. If you read Homer, she used her charms to delay the Greek hero. He is Odysseus is the Greek. He's got another name in Latin, but you know who we're talking about, right? She delayed him for 12 years. Some European English person in the 17th century was in the Caribbean and heard our people talking about calypso and said, oh, they're pronouncing the word wrong. It's calypso. I kid you not. I kid you not. And our people accept that because we don't know. But calypso is a word from Hausa and other African languages, and it means it's a shout of encouragement. Sing it. Tell them. And if you listen to some of the old-time calypso,
Story.
when Lord Nelson singing Lion the Lion and so on, it started, tell them, Charlie, or something, it's a shout. That's generic to African people. And the calypso is native in that way to the Caribbean. But if you go to Jamaica, there was a kind of calypso called the mento. And mento became ska. Ska became rocksteady. Rocksteady became reggae. Then you had an offshoot in dub. All this happened in the last 50 years. And you could go to certain parts of South America up in the Andes and you're going to hear music that is mento. But we don't know. And some people tell me, oh, calypso and soca have nothing to do with reggae. And some Jamaicans say reggae is reggae, think of no relationship. We're making ourselves wrong. And we're cutting our connections to each other. It's the truth. Reggae has roots in Africa. What's wrong with saying the truth? It doesn't make you less a Jamaican or reggae less reggae. And as we run this, we've had exchanges between Africa and the Caribbean and the Americans. And I want to talk about something that happened in 1957 at the independence of Ghana. I wasn't there, I heard about it. Kitchener, Caisonian from Trinidad. Yes. Do you know the unofficial national anthem of Ghana?
He said it.
He sang it.
Wow.
The unofficial national anthem of Jamaica, or one of the popular songs, is sung by another Trinidadian Caisonian. The independent song. That's I'll tell you his name just now. And when Kitchener and others went to Ghana and they sang, they influenced high life. E.T. mentioned these people. Okay? So if you listen to some of the horn arrangements in E.T. Mensa, you will be forgiven for thinking that you're listening to Blakey. Check it out if you think, I'm not telling you the truth. And there were a group of Africans from Suriname. They did a dance that astonished the whole of Ashanti land. Those people preserve African culture, or at least they used to. And they had kept it almost, we would say, first time, from first time. And when they did it in Ghana, the Ashanti people were shocked because they were seeing an older and perhaps authentic version or more authentic version of what they possessed, because it had become compromised. I don't even know, it has shifted in certain ways. These are stories we could talk and learn. The fact is that there's been interaction between Africa and the Caribbean, and if you ever went to Africa, you'll be shocked at how many people you know look like somebody, neighbor, and that kind of stuff.
No, when I go to Haji's house, they all tell me that I'm from some other country. There's always an argument.
Okay, we got time
All
for
right.
two more questions.
One more question.
Two more questions. 1, 2.
Can I read a question?
Oh, go ahead.
So, my thought went back to when I was in high school. Dr. Walter Rodney and his Pan-African and Caribbean type black power that he was pushing back in the 70s. And if you know how he was ridiculed by the political structure in the Caribbean, I see that the same thing going on now with my good brother Tory.
Who is that?
Dollar indigenous.
Oh.
In Africa. And so the elements of the world leadership is to eliminate people like these. So how is it that we're going to go about to protect these brothers from the disaster that they face with telling the truth?
Well, I don't think that we could be definitive, we could offer details, because you don't know when an attack would come and in what form it will come. But I'll tell you a story. I'll tell you 2 stories, which is really the same story. One of the reasons why the elites of this country failed in the only military attack they launched on the Cuban Revolution is because the Cuban army, the regulars, didn't get a chance, It was the local militia in the Bay of Pigs. They were ready.
Just tipped off.
Right? The people defended their revolution, sometimes with their lives. Story 1. Story 2. Some generals in Venezuela kidnapped the popular leader. He's an ancestor now.
Maduro?
No.
Chavez?
Chavez. Kidnapped Chavez. Put him on an island and announced that they had taken over things. Well, they didn't reckon with the so-called ordinary people on the streets of Caracas, who came out, surrounded the presidential palace, said, bring him back. Bring him back. They had to. Here's my point. If you educate and motivate people, they will defend the genuine revolution. Human beings are not stupid, well, not all of us. Right? And if people know that things are happening in their interest, what do you think? They can fold their hands?
Support.
Well, this is what happened in those 2 instances. And it happened in many other instances too. We cannot be afraid of educating each other, educating the broad masses of our people. Because they will know what's in their interest. And I'll tell you this. Imperialism knows that it may assassinate a particular human being, a leader, but they cannot assassinate a revolution. Lumumba, Nkrumah, Chris Hani, Gaddafi, and many others. They've murdered them. Have they murdered the revolution? Have they murdered the revolution?
Slow it down.
You know, if you're a riverman, you would see rocks slowing down the current of a river. Have you ever seen them stop it?
Ah, shit.